Good morning, everybody. My name is Benjamin Shaffer. I am legal counsel for Goldbach. And what is Goldbach? Goldbach is money, but it's a new and innovative kind of money. But in order to understand what the problems are with money and the problems that we're trying to solve, we first have to kind of ask ourselves some difficult questions about what is money? What is it that we want from our money, and how does that either serve the purposes of liberty or take our liberties away? So famously, we have the three most fundamental freedoms upon which all of our human rights are based. This is according to John Stuart Mill and some of the other early political philosophers. Life, liberty, and property. And the idea is that these are three ways of expressing the same thing. Not three different liberties, but one liberty upon which everything else is based. If you can take away any one of those three, then you've taken away all of them. Life, liberty, and property. So if they can take your life, of what use is your property? Your property is gone. If they can take your liberty, if they can lock you up, enslave you, you don't have rights to your property anymore. You are the property. And you don't have rights to your life anymore because you cannot live it as you wish. But here's the one that we often miss because of the phrase, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, is that property is also intrinsic to and most fundamental to all of our freedoms. If they can take away your property, they have taken your life. Why? Because each of us spend our lives, work our lives to accomplish the things that we want to build in this world, that we want to have in this world. We trade our lives for our property. This is especially true, of course, of a wage or salaried worker who literally works at a job to accomplish a certain goal. If they can take away that goal, they've taken away all of the time of your life that you spent working for it, as well as your liberty. Because if they can take your property, then your freedoms are also abridged in the exact same measure. When they take your property, you no longer have the freedom to have the resources that you need or to use them as you will, in which case your liberty is also curtailed. So, a monetary system is fundamental to our concept of property, our concept of what it is that we own, what its value is, and how it's going to be used. And therefore, it's fundamental to our freedoms. So, why Goldbach? Gold has been used for thousands of years as the most fundamental unit of currency. The most fundamental way that we trade or value large things is how much gold is it. They'd say a man's worth his weight in gold. But they would also say a man's worth his salt. Why? Because gold is a very, very difficult form of money to use. And salt was a form of money as well. Salt is far more abundant, but it does take time and effort to produce. You know, sea salt, you've got to bring in the seawater, you've got to let it evaporate, and do a whole process. In order to do that, makes it a somewhat rare resource, in spite of its abundance in the world. And therefore, it was used as the most basic form of money or wages that they could measure for a day's work. Gold, however, was only used for like massive grain shipments from one empire to another. If Rome wanted to do business with Egypt, they would send gold for shiploads of grain, things like that. And so it wasn't as useful for the everyday needs of, gee, I'm hungry, I need a sandwich, or I want a dozen eggs. You couldn't do that in gold. And to this day, the US Mint, for example, still mints gold coin. One ounce gold coin from the US Mint, which is rather laughably labeled $50, is actually worth about $2,000. If you go to a gold dealer, they're going to charge you some premium over spot for that gold coin, and usually makes it about $2,000 as of 2022 in order to buy that 1 ounce gold coin. Well, what do you do if every purchase you make, you cannot make change for smaller than $2,000? Just doesn't work as a monetary system, right? People say, well, maybe you could buy a car. Well, sure, you could buy a $2,000 car, or a $4,000 car, or a $6,000 car, but you could not buy a $5,000 car, or a $3,000 car, right? Even numbers only. So that also, it doesn't work even there, because we have to hone in on a price. So let me get back to, how do we value things then? If it's not a certain number of gold coins, if it's not a certain number of pounds of salt, we have, in our modern world, decided to default to the dollar. Almost every one of you has a concept in your mind, a mental form of what is $1 million, what is $1,000, what is $100. And when I say that, even subconsciously, your mind registers those amounts. and thinks, I know what that value is. It's this value. But here's the problem. Because of our inflation, especially this year, I believe it will probably accelerate. I'm a bit bullish on that. Of course, a lot of people at the Federal Reserve continually say, it's temporary, or, well, maybe it's not that temporary, but at least we think we've seen the worst of it. And they've said that every quarter for a while now. And maybe we have seen the worst of it. Maybe they're right. But even if they're right, it makes the dollar a very poor unit of measurement. I would be willing to bet anything that when I say $1 million or $1,000 or $100, the value that you picture in your head varies based on your birth year, dramatically. Whether or not you mean it to, whether or not you think of it that way, consciously, subconsciously, you know, because viscerally you have experienced different things with those amounts of money that are just not true anymore. They're not true in our economy, because now $100 is more like I can fill up my car. And it used to be something more along the lines of, oh, this will feed my family for a month. Right? And it doesn't take very many years for those things to change dramatically. So what we need is a way to have a sense of property, a measure of value that is not being dictated to us by an institution that continually modifies and changes what that measure of value is. So I would propose that the first problem of money that we're trying to solve is that the dollar is actually a poor measure of value, in spite of the fact that it's the primary measure of value that we're all using all the time. Now, people will say, in the dollar's defense, yeah, but it's better than any of the other fiat currencies. You know, at least we're not talking about the Turkish lira that 20 years ago took 6 zeros off their money and is now facing doing it again as their money is devaluing rapidly. I have unfortunately at home, I have a Zimbabwe note for $100 trillion that many of you have probably seen. You have one of those too? Yeah. And, you know, of what meaning is a dollar when it changed so rapidly? You know, one Zimbabwe dollar used to have parity with the US dollar, you know, roughly. But the problem is that they printed so darn many of them. And of course, our monetary supply is going through the roof, and they say, well, the only way we can stop inflation is to tamp down that monetary supply. Well, they've got one tool that will really, really, really take a ton of money out of the economy really fast. They could reinstate the student loan payments. That is not going to be popular, let me tell you. If they're like, you know what, sorry, millennials, sorry, Generation X and Generation Z, you guys are going to pay the price for inflation by having all of your assets completely wiped out right now. I mean, that's basically what the effect is going to be if they restart that. We've had this breath of relief as they stopped that program, and I don't think anybody in that generation wants to go back to paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month only to see their principal balance increase every month anyway, which is the situation of, you know, a great many of them. The other thing they can do, of course, is that they can raise their interest rates enough that no one can get any credit, which should slow the amount of money going into the economy. But that's still not going to stop it, in my opinion, because you have the problem with international banks. International banks have to, when they issue their currency, like say, of course, here's the hot button one, the ruble. When they issue a ruble in Russia, the central bank has to say, we have some assets in reserve, we have these reserve assets, and then we're going to issue our currency against those assets. That's the theory anyway. Now there's lots of ways that these reserves are fractionalized, and therefore expand dramatically, but there's supposed to be something in there. And so some of them hold some gold, and some of them hold some silver, and some of them hold other things, but the vast majority of the world banking system has held its reserves in treasury notes, treasury bonds. And so basically US dollars. They hold it in US dollars, and then they issue their own currency backed up by those US dollars. The problem is that they're building their superstructure of all these other fractional reserves, all of their expanding money supplies, but they're building it on a foundation of the dollar, and the dollar itself is what's having the problem. This is one of the reasons why, in spite of the fact inflation is worse in the rest of the world than it is in the United States right now, the dollar is really the cause of the inflation here and there. And of course it's worse there because they've fractionalized it more. So they're simply like a magnifying glass for our problems. When we have a collapse or a crash, theirs is a little bit worse because their central banks are magnifying that problem. So, solutions. Now, a lot of people say the solution is in the blockchain. Let's build the best crypto possible. Of course, there's Bitcoin purists who say, sorry, you're never going to beat the original. Let's do everything in Bitcoin. Other people say there's other solutions, there's innovations that we can add to this that will fix all the problems. I don't think we're quite there yet, frankly, as a currency. My theory on blockchain is that it's an extremely useful technology for replacing certain existing institutions. If you look up more information about Web3 and things like that, there's so many different ways that we can apply the blockchain to make certain bureaucracies and other institutions more or less irrelevant. Really, this is one of the things that bums me out the most about things like NFT technology, is that I feel like, why are we doing this for doodles and random stuff when the NFT technology could be used to replace the entire intellectual property institutions? We could replace the entire patent and trademark and copyright laws with the blockchain. And that way we would decentralize it, we would eliminate tons of bureaucracy, tons of government control and manipulation, and we would essentially eliminate even the need for a lot of the court oversight that takes place, because the blockchain would hold people accountable. So anyways, I could go on that tangent and talk about all the powerful uses of blockchain, but one of the things that is unfortunate to me is that the blockchain has not, at least so far, with the exception of places like Porcfest, really been used as an everyday currency enough, in my opinion, to replace our currency system. And I think that really, as a currency, it's a little bit weaker. It can be a reserve asset more than it is a daily currency. One of the reasons for that is that it's not as visceral. To go back to the beginning, what is money? It's how we engage with our property. And the most important thing about our property isn't the billionaires and trillionaires that have incomprehensible wealth. It's not about the incomprehensible numbers of, oh, I think I have a 401k balance somewhere that in the future will promise me some kind of stability, or maybe Social Security will take care of me in my old age. We all know that these are kind of ephemeral concepts. We hope that they're out there, we plan for them in the hope that it will work. But money really is what you have in your hand. Did any of you eat breakfast this morning? That's the money that matters. It's the blood sugar rush that you need each day to get up and do your work. It's the bottle in your hand that you can drink out of and say, I'm refreshed. I have what I need. And so I believe that money needs to remain a certain amount of visceral. It needs to exist in our physical hands. And so even though blockchain technologies and Goldbacks appear to be trying to solve the money problem in two very different ways, we're almost opposites, I really think what we are is we are perfect complementarians. There's great potential out there, and I would encourage all of you to look into the possibilities of putting the Goldbacks on a blockchain. Right? There's ways that we can work together. In the digital world and the physical world, that gap has to be fully bridged. It's not effectively bridged yet. But Goldbacks are effective money because the money's in your hands. Okay? One of the problems with most gold-backed currencies is that they are not gold. They're a promise for gold. It's a certificate that you can bring in and trade for gold. However, the Goldback is gold. You don't have to trust some institution somewhere and say, hey, if I need the gold, will you give it to me? Instead, the gold's already in your hands. And as an attorney, I have been very, very cautious, especially under the tutelage of Lawrence Hilton, who is our general counsel, who's been working for decades on sound money policy and its intersection with law. We've been very, very cautious to make sure that the Goldback is fully legal, and that we are not violating not only any of the rules and laws, but any of even the requests or implications in any previous cases that have been brought against any local currency system. And so we've been very, very cautious to make sure that they are legal tender instruments. that essentially are therefore backed up by legal tender gold, minted by the U.S. Mint, so that hopefully, and under state laws as well, so that hopefully if and when somebody decides that they don't like this project and tries to make some rule against it that hasn't been invented yet, we can say, your problem isn't with us. Go talk to the governor, talk to the National Guard, talk to the Mint. All we're doing is fulfilling our legal duties and rights under the schema that was created by law. But let's say somebody does get rid of us. Let's say we go out of business, something changes. The cool thing is you don't have to worry about that. If you have Goldbacks in your pocket, you can still circulate them. And if we go out of business and they shut us down and we stop making any more of these, all it does is it makes the Goldbacks that you own more valuable. The other thing that's really nice is that it shows New Hampshire history. And of course, the Utah series shows the history of Utah, and the Nevada one shows the history of Nevada. And this way, each bill is personalized to the laws and to the history and the culture of each jurisdiction that has a Goldback. So here in New Hampshire, we're focusing primarily on the New Hampshire Goldback, which beautifully displays the independent spirit of New Hampshire, including Lady Liberty on the 50, who is depicted as one of the people of the Pine Tree Rebellion, one of the earliest parts of essentially what became the American Revolution, saying, we don't need a king. And so instead of their flag saying we appeal to the king, their flag said we appeal to heaven, or we appeal to God. They put on their flags because they wanted to say there's a natural right. And there's a fundamental natural right that you have to your property. So why should your property be held or manipulated by an outside institution? This can't be inflated away. This can't be manipulated by any outside institution. When it's in your pocket, it is your property in a more fundamental and visceral way, like I'm talking about. When you exchange a piece of gold for the things that you need, you are taking value and exchanging it for value. And so you're reminded to be cautious and careful about the things that are yours. One of the biggest dangers of the digital system is that we lose touch with our physical needs and our physical reality and what it actually means to do a transaction. I was watching a talk, and a fellow who was an advocate for understanding money had a real wake-up call. He'd been using Apple Pay on his phone. And he had a real wake-up call when his son, I think he was 4 or 5 years old, said, "Dad, I wish I had a phone so I could buy things." And the problem is that even this guy who understands money deeply realized that the younger generations, they're not understanding that this is an exchange. Of course, he's just a kid, but he thought that a phone was a magic wand that grown-ups have that entitles them to everything they need. He doesn't know that his father is giving up something in exchange for the goods that he's receiving, right? When we use cash, there's a certain power in that. You have to weigh the value. Is this really worth this part of my property, this part of my time? It makes us more accountable. And so that's really what it comes down to. Gold is accountability in a monetary system. You cannot just make this up out of thin air. When we want to launch a new Goldback series, and if anybody's an investor, we can make this very much worth your time. We need an investment. We can't just print this out of thin air. It's made out of gold. We have to get the gold and manufacture this. In order to do that, it requires large sums of money. So, for example, here in New Hampshire, we had to have somebody who was ready to pony up hundreds of thousands of dollars for us to purchase the gold to manufacture these. Now, in return, the nice thing is that if somebody purchases 100,000 Goldbacks in order to launch the currency, they don't get them immediately. They have to they basically deferred their delivery so that we can manufacture them and then sell them to get them into circulation. And then what are we going to do? We're going to take that money, we're going to buy more gold, we're going to manufacture more Goldbacks. And we're going to hopefully do that about 6 to 10 to 20 times before the bill comes due, the investment comes due. And then the initial investor, we give them their 100,000 Goldbacks they purchased, plus 3.5% more Goldbacks than they purchased in the first place. And then, of course, the gold has gone up in value. The gold that we gave them that's additional gold has also gone up in value. which is basically resisting inflation. And the nice thing also is that they can buy it at our manufacturing costs because they've enabled our manufacturing, so that they get a better rate than the actual exchange rate, generally. Generally, that's another 10%. And last but not least, and this is a popular argument here at Porcfest, but I have to say, to be very cautious, I cannot give legal advice directly to everybody or to this recording. But as a tax attorney, this is a basic rule. You do not pay taxes on unrealized gains. You realize a gain, then you pay the tax on your realized gain, which basically means you spend dollars for an asset, you sell that asset for a higher number of dollars, and the difference is your realized gain. When you do that, you have to pay your taxes. However, in this particular investment, you can defer realizing your gain, basically indefinitely. Because if you've purchased gold, and you have the gold, and you happen to use your gold, it's your gold. Or just simply hold your gold, it's still your gold. You have not realized a gain and therefore would owe no taxes on a potentially very powerful and lucrative investment. But you have to play your cards right. And so to get details, please consult an attorney. So to get back to the actual use, I was saying salt was used as money. They also had bronze coins, copper coins, things like that. And why did they have these other metals instead of just using gold? Well, because you need something small. This one Goldback is the smallest unit of currency, smallest unit of gold that's ever been manufactured to my knowledge. There are lots of fractional gold products, tiny, tiny coins, little tiny bars that they put inside a larger container so that you don't lose it. But they're usually more than this. This is like half a grain, if you're familiar with the grain measurement system for precious metals. 1/1000th of a troy ounce, making today's exchange rate, internationally, today's exchange rate is $3.91 for one Goldback. Here at Porcfest, we're doing $4 even because we do not want to carry around pockets full of pennies just to use an alternative currency. But that's something you can buy a taco with. That's something you can buy a dozen eggs with, or a gallon of gas, or a gallon of milk, right? And across New Hampshire, year-round, there are dozens and dozens of businesses that will accept payment in this. We have gas stations, we have grocers, we have a lot of community services and community centers, yes. We have a lot of professional services where people will be happy to exchange their goods and services for the Goldbacks. And what I'd like to see more of is, let's get away from thinking in terms of money is dollars and start measuring it in a different measure. But how can we do that? So far, as much as I love the technology, blockchain has not been super useful as a unit of value. If I say, oh yeah, that's worth so many Satoshis, most of us aren't comfortable with that because it's been worth a different number of Satoshis or a different number of a fraction of Bitcoin. But Goldbacks are one that you can. And so if you're a business owner, think about putting out some prices, dual prices. You can put out the price in Goldbacks and the price in dollars, and you'll find out something that I found out the hard way. I'm gonna let you guys look at this. I'm gonna tell you a story about my own law firm. Yeah, don't rob me, but check them out. It's kind of fun to see the different designs and feel the weight. This is the only currency in the world it's the least counterfeitable currency in the world. Even a blind person or a person blindfolded can tell you if it is counterfeit or not. Why? Because you can feel the weight of gold difference and the texture. Because we do this through a process called vacuum deposition, which is basically like 3D printing, but we use lasers. And these high ionized lasers that carry the gold atoms down the laser like a stream. And that's our nozzle, basically, in this vacuum chamber. And then we are 3D printing that bill. And so all the security features are embedded in the gold at an atomic level. So here's what happened to me. I had a law firm. I was the managing partner, and we accepted a few gold coins in exchange for our services in the past. We had a very eccentric client who was like, no, I only pay in gold and silver. I don't pay in anything else. And we were like, okay, we'll do that. You know, at the time, I think that we were too enamored with the spot price, which is really diverging from reality, horrifically, in my opinion, at this point, with all of the paper contracts that people have. But we accepted these gold and silver coins. But we did find that an awkward way of doing business. And so I was at the Utah County Fair. It was the very first event that the Goldback company ever went to try to tell people about Goldbacks. They had this idea, this revolutionary idea, what if we could make a gold money? And they'd only created the 1 Goldback and the 5 Goldback. There were no other denominations in the currency yet. And they came to the fair and said, and we're just asking business owners, what do you think of this? Now I was just there with my kids, but I saw it and I thought, now wait a second, is this fungible? One of the things that money has to have in order to be a functional currency is fungibility. You have to be able to exchange one denomination for another denomination. Such as, you should be able to go in and say, hey, I need to make change for this 20, and someone can give you 21s, or 4 5s or something like that. You have to be able to do that, otherwise it's not a true currency. And you can't do that in gold and silver. No other gold and silver product in the world can you do that with. But Goldbacks you can. So my first thought was, well, this says 5 and this says 1, but can I really trade 5 1s for 1 5 or 1 5 for 5 1s? And they said, yes. Yes, you can. And I thought, oh my goodness, this changes everything. This changes everything. And I thought, this is going to change the whole way we think about money. And I said, but wait a second, here's the other problem. What about the 1? Is it too expensive for me to really use? Because I'd taken in these gold and silver coins as payment for legal services, and I knew how difficult it was to find liquidity in that, right? And he said, oh yeah, at the time, see, here's your first hint as to where this story is going. At the time, he says, oh yeah, this 1 Goldback is worth, I believe it was, on that very first day, $2.59. And I was like, oh wow, well that's really small. I could absolutely buy something with that. And I was like, man, this fixes money, that's amazing. And he's like, would you accept payment in this? That's what we're trying to ask. Do you own a business? And I said, yeah, I'm a managing partner in a law firm. And he says, well, that'd be great. Do you want to join a network of businesses that do it? And I said, how many businesses are in the network? He said, well, my dad and my brother and our general counsel who helped us establish this, and they have an insurance company, so there's like 4. And I was like, well, make me number 5. So I got the little thing out and I joined and I was basically the first outside business to join a business network that does Goldbacks. So one of the first things I did was I made a little sign. I put some Goldbacks in a frame. I made a little thing, put up in my office that said, we accept the Utah Goldback here. And then I told people, hey, if you want to go get Goldbacks, bring them to me, I'll take payment in that. And then I made a price chart. I said, okay, this is my hourly rate in dollars, this is my hourly rate in Goldbacks. This is the flat fee things like estate planning services. This is how much it costs for us to build you a trust estate plan in dollars. This is how much it costs in Goldbacks. So this whole project is still fairly young. This was in the fall of 2019. In 2020, somebody comes in for an estate plan, and they look at my chart and they say, well, I'm not paying you in Goldbacks, I'll pay you in dollars. And I said, well, why? When I made my chart, I made it so that you'd get a 10% off discount for paying me in Goldbacks, because I wanted to make sure that people saw that as an advantage and would bring me gold instead of paper, right? They said, well, no, I'm not going to do it in Goldbacks, because if I pay you in Goldbacks, it's way more expensive than if I pay you in dollars. And I thought, no, that can't be right. That can't be right. It was exactly the opposite when I made the chart. So I pull out my phone, I do a couple calculations. Wouldn't you know it? We don't notice inflation because in our brains, we use the dollar as a measure of value. I pulled out my phone, did some calculations. Yep, it was a 10% upcharge almost to pay me in Goldbacks as it was in dollars, because I hadn't changed my dollar prices and I hadn't changed my Goldback prices. But wouldn't you know it, the dollar was steadily losing value as the Goldback was rapidly gaining marketability. So I need to address a couple concerns here that really speak to the question of, is the Goldback worth it? And that really comes down to, why is it so much more over spot? The very first thing that people think about when they think about precious metals, in a lot of cases, is the spot price. Give me the spot price, and that's how I'm going to value your gold or your silver. The problem with that is, one, it's fairly skewed. It's no longer, I believe, a true representation of the actual gold and silver markets. But far beyond that, there's this idea that that is the value of a commodity before it's been put into a useful form. And Goldbacks are a useful form. They're a currency. They're not just raw gold. So for example, who here is willing to pay more for a car or a truck than its scrap price in raw steel, right? I'm absolutely willing to pay a lot more for a working vehicle than the scrap value of that steel. Why? Because it gets you somewhere. It's exactly the same thing with the Goldbach. It does cost more. It has to cost more. I mentioned briefly the vacuum deposition technology that we're using to make it. It's something that can be used to, for example, create nanocomputers and other things like that. It's a fairly recent, very advanced technology. So in some ways, Goldbach is more of a technology company than anything else. But it gets you somewhere. That's the point. Goldbach gets you a place that gold has never brought mankind ever. It gets you a sandwich. It gets you a bottle of water or juice. It gets you a unit of measure that's consistent over time. And of course, our manufacturing costs mean that we have to add to spot, especially considering the fact that spot is a pretty shaky thing right now. We can't even, as a manufacturer, you'd think if anyone can get spot price, it would be us, who are literally connected to the largest gold dealers in the world, who literally supply the US Mint with their gold. You would think that we would be able to buy it at spot, and oftentimes we cannot buy gold at spot. But our prices on gold are often higher, and then our manufacturing goes way up from there. Thank you. The manufacturing cost, like I said, isn't easy. So, we've got to go 60 or 70% over spot just to manufacture it. But here's the nice thing. We were really concerned at the beginning. We thought, oh man, it's so expensive to make these. What if the market doesn't value them at higher than our manufacturing cost? In which case, we'll just be shoveling, throwing money in a hole, basically, just to manufacture something, just for that something to be given away at lower than our cost. Luckily, that has never been a problem. At the very first, we tried to have dealers sign different contracts and agreements that they wouldn't undercut the manufacturing cost because we were concerned that was going to be a problem. It has never been a problem. The market has consistently valued Goldbacks at higher than their manufacturing cost and enough for us to make a profit. It's actually valued even higher so that we can sell it for our profit to a dealer, and then that dealer can sell it to the public, and then the public can exchange them at slight increases at each stage, so that still businesses are more than happy to accept them at the exchange rate, because that exchange rate represents a real value. So how do we determine real value? The first question that a lot of people have when especially people who are old hat in gold and silver, is they'll say, okay, what's the premium over spot? What they're really asking is, how much is it going to cost me to do this investment? Because traditionally what you do is you buy your gold at a high price, over, a certain percentage over spot. And then if you need to sell it back, you can sell it back at spot or a little below spot. Now, in a lot of cases, like I said, because I think spot is diverging from reality, in a lot of cases I'm surprised how many bullion dealers are willing to pay just any random person off the street more than spot, a certain percentage over spot even, for physical gold and silver. But still, there's this spread, right? And what you want to know is, how much is it going to cost me to use this? And so your traditional gold and silver investors, when I say that a Goldbach has a premium that's 80 to 100% over spot, they go, oh my gosh, why on earth would I do that? It's going to cost me double just to use this. But it doesn't. Because a Goldbach isn't just a raw commodity, it's a currency. It operates not on its spread over spot, but on its exchange rate value. And that value is determined by a market. So you could think of it this way. You could think of it as a hybrid product a little bit. In one form, it's raw gold. You can take a wheelbarrow full of these, throw them in a giant crucible, and get out slightly more than the face amount of raw gold, because we do put slightly more in there. Our credibility depends on the fact that if you melt down a Goldbach, if you test it, if you x-ray it, if you do all the quality controls that we also do before they go out, if you do any of those tests on a Goldbach, you will find it is 999 pure gold, 24 karat gold. You will find that it's slightly overweight of what we promise. So yeah, you can take a wheelbarrow full of these and shovel them into a giant crucible and get out a bunch of gold. And you know what? If you did that, you would be destroying its value as a currency. But the beauty is, you'd still have half your money left. What investment can you make where you are guaranteed, even in the absolute worst case scenario, the most destructive possible scenario, you still have 50 cents on the dollar left of your investment? That's not too bad. But it's also not too good. We don't want people melting these down. Please don't melt these down. I mean, unless it's just for a test. Go ahead and assay it all you want, prove that they're real, but don't destroy their value. Because there's another half to their value. That other 100% is more than made up by the market value, which is based on an exchange rate. So we're all familiar with the idea that there are various currencies in the world. There's the euro, there's the dollar, there's the rupee, there's various other dollars, so-called pounds, and so forth. And you know that you can exchange a certain number of these for a certain number of those. And that really depends on a market, people exchanging for value. You get the same thing with the Goldbach because it is a true currency, not just a gold product. About half of its value depends on that market aspect. And like I said, the market has consistently valued them at 100% or more than 100% over the spot price of the commodity gold that goes into their manufacture. Which means, full circle, long story short, you don't pay a premium. When you invest in gold, like raw gold, gold shots, gold coins, gold bars, you have to worry about this spread, right? You're going to buy at one price, you're going to sell at a different price. And then, of course, what you're really hoping to do is just wait. You're going to outweight inflation. You're going to buy high and sell low, but inflation means that in any other investment, you would have lost more than what you've lost by paying this fee, essentially, on both ends for the privilege of owning gold. But with the Goldbach, you're going to buy at the exchange rate, you're going to spend it at the exchange rate, you're going to sell it at the exchange rate, which means you don't lose your money, right? So here at Porcfest, for example, we've rounded it to $4 for an exchange rate here, and pretty universally, almost every vendor here will honor Goldbachs at a 4-to-1 ratio. One Goldbach is $4 this year. And we at the Goldbach Pavilion, we have a Goldbach marketplace up there, are more than happy to exchange anything for Goldbachs, just about anything. I did have a guy who was like, hey, will you take some, what was it, like lighters and random stuff? And I was like, well, that would be a sale, right? But if you have a currency, crypto, foreign currencies, gold, silver, any of that, we will trade for Goldbachs. And then if you have too many Goldbachs, though, nobody's really had a problem by having, I've got too much gold. Darn it, I'm just too rich. But if you do decide that you really need money from a vendor that will not accept Goldbachs, probably outside Porcfest, we will exchange them for dollars at the end of the week for you if you think you have too many Goldbachs. So free currency exchange, no fees, $4 in, $4 out, $4 credit at a vendor. You don't lose any of your money, which is one of the few investments that you can make that's relatively risk-free. Now, is it possible that the Goldbach exchange rate could go down? Yes, it has. It fluctuates. However, it's really been a far more stable measure of value than the dollar. The main fluctuations, some of those fluctuations have been in the buying power of gold, and some of those fluctuations have been in the manufacturing cost or in the demand for Goldbachs. But the biggest fluctuations in the value of the Goldbach haven't been the Goldbach's fault. There have been fluctuations in the value of the dollar. It's the dollar that's unstable. The Goldbach has been very stable over time. So that one Goldbach is worth about a dozen eggs or a gallon of milk. One Goldbach is worth a cheap sandwich, or maybe two for a really nice burger or something, And that stability, I believe, will continue, potentially for the next 1,000 years. If Goldbach technology existed in ancient Egypt, I think it would have been worth a dozen eggs, a gallon of milk. In 1,000 years, a dozen eggs, a gallon of milk. Because gold is a certain amount of finite, and its marketability is a certain amount of usefulness, and therefore it's a very, very stable money system. And so, to conclude, what is money? Money is really the value that you have. People will say, money can't buy happiness.
By that they mean that there's diminishing returns on what you can get for your money. They don't mean the poor should learn to live in utter destitution and desperation at all times, hungry and tired and cold. What they mean is there's a diminishing return on what you can get for your money. And why is that? Because we are physical creatures. We are social creatures. There's only so much you can do with your money because there's only so much a man needs. There's a famous story from Leo Tolstoy. How much land does a man need? And famously, a man who was too greedy for more and more and more than he could actually till eventually found himself in all the land he needed, 3 by 6 and 6 feet deep, right? And yet we are these physical creatures. This body came into this world naked, it'll go out of this world with nothing, right? But while in this world, we each need property to secure our life, to secure our liberty, to enjoy them. And so the most physical currency is the one that you can most depend on for the types of transactions that are most necessary to secure your life, your liberty, and your property. And so I think everybody should have some Goldbacks in their wallet so that you can say, yeah, my pocket doesn't belong to the Federal Reserve. It doesn't belong to some central planner. My pocket belongs to me. This is my property. And eventually, I'm hoping that we get to the point where, in New Hampshire at least, we get universal acceptance. Right now, I said there's dozens and dozens of businesses. Well, that sounds like a flex, but it's really not, right? Dozens and dozens of businesses is not very many compared to the total number of businesses in New Hampshire. But if every one of us leaves Porcfest with a few Goldbacks in our pocket, and when we go into some business, we say, hey, do you accept the Goldbacks? And they say, I don't know, what's that? Well, you've already planted the seed. And sooner or later, wouldn't it be nice if we could say, this is the New Hampshire currency. It's a free market currency in a free state where we know that we can secure our rights to life, liberty, and property through free and voluntary exchange, rather than through waving our phone at something or putting a little plastic card through a reader. Because every time you do that, you diminish your own brain's ability to measure value and understand the exchanges and the obligations that you're taking. This is one of the reasons why, again, we have a problem with the student debt crisis, because debt itself is this, it's become a fiction. It's become a manipulated fiction that doesn't comport with reality. And so in order for money to be of true value, it has to reflect reality, not subvert it. And so thank you for coming today, and I hope that we can serve each of you with a free market currency. Thank you. That's what I was planning on. Good. I didn't look at my clock, but I was hoping for that. Questions? Yeah, I know. Makes you think about it, right? But I pulled out my wallet. All right. Question? Yes? Question? No, you did have one. Okay.
So how do you know that the gold is really gold?
Gotcha. So earlier, I described this a little bit. We have a very exact manufacturing process. We are doing this like 3D printing with a laser. So we don't count the number of atoms exactly, but we do apply it at an atomic level. Very exact manufacturing process. Second, there's an X-ray system that can be used to determine the material and what it's made out of, as well as its thickness and weight that we use to test each one. It's basically a type of spectrometry, right? And then there's something called a fire assay. That does destroy it. We take a couple of them at random out of every batch. We melt them down in a crucible. We weigh the remaining gold to make sure that it's at least 2% more than what we promise on each one. By the way, one of the reasons why this is the smallest gold product and why nobody else does this is because of how hard it is to get your margins correct. The margin of our profit margin depends upon us doing it at 2% over and not more than 5% over the weight, because that's our whole profit margin. And when you're talking about these as percentages of 1,000th of an ounce is a tiny, tiny amount of gold. And that's our whole profit margin, right? So we have to be very, very exact with that. And then it's not just that we do these things in-house, right? Third parties do this. All the major gold bullion dealers in the world have also tested this. JM Bullion, SD Bullion, Dillon Gage, they have the Fizz Trade system. A bunch of them have all tested it, they have all verified. You're more than welcome to verify it yourself, but how are you going to do that? Please use the proper materials. We just brought on a new distributor, First National Bullion Company, and they just did their own, again, third-party assay just for their own comfort and verified, once again, that all of the measurements and purity is exactly what we promise. So, unfortunately, I know as libertarians, a lot of us are like, wait a second, I don't trust anyone else to do it. Well, then I invite you to do it too. Go ahead.
Yeah, but the problem is, so you said you can do it with spectroscopy, right? So that's the first sheet of that. I presume that to get the value which is written on it, you have more than one sheet of that.
Oh, yes, yes, of course.
The only way to really know
Is also the fire assay, yeah. Yeah, but again, like I said, there's a lot of different ways you can test them. I invite you to do so if you want, or you can take the word of hundreds of other people who also have done it, so, and companies that have also verified it. Here's the other thing too, that people will say, well, how do I know if it's real? It really comes down to, how do I know if it's a counterfeit? And there are anti-counterfeiting things built into each bill. Each one is serialized. The serial number is not sequential. It is actually a key, a cryptographic key, by which we can tell you other details about the bill. It has all of the features that would be on a paper currency, such as things that cannot be photocopied, things that irrational numbers built into the various patterns that are actually therefore not true patterns, and all kinds of other random stuff, as well as the detailed artwork and things like that. But more importantly, just for the casual observer, right? If someone's handing you a Goldback, there's two things you can do that nobody has ever been able to imitate yet, and I believe we're decades ahead of any attempted counterfeit. And that is, look at the back. If the back is blank, it would be a fake. But the back of a Goldback actually has the image and every security feature imprinted in the gold itself at an atomic level. And you can look at it with a jeweler's glass or microscope, and you will see those tiny details of gold. And if you look really close, like with an electron microscope, you'll see the bumps of the different gold atoms as we've shot them in there with the laser. The gold, therefore, itself takes on all of the anti-counterfeiting security features. If you were to try to counterfeit this, even if you were capable of, say, counterfeiting US money, you would have to be able to copy all these patterns. You still wouldn't be able to create that image. You'd have some kind of a foil in here. The second way, and therefore it would be blank. The second way that you can tell that it's real is by the weight. If you touch one and feel one, you can feel the difference between the 1 and the 25 or the 50. You can feel that there's 25 or 50 times as much gold in that, and any fake, they'd all be uniform. So, any other questions, or are we totally done with questions? We're pretty much done with questions, sorry. But I'll talk to you after. Thank you.
Give it up for Ben.